And welcome back to another episode of Freedom Friday here on the Ohio Patriot Education Network YouTube channel. I'm, as always, your host here, the Ohio Patriot. And for today's episode, we're going to talk about why Trump needs to invoke the Insurrection Act against the left at this point. Doesn't know what the Insurrection Act is. In 1807, founding father Thomas Jefferson created a piece of legislation called the Insurrection Act. Its initial meaning and law of the land basically was to help repel the British Empire because at the time they were fucking with our ships and stuff, and the imports we had to America is what it was there, and it was basically a way to repel rebellion, invaders, etc. is what it was there, and since then it's been used a bunch of different times over the decades. The last time it was technically invoked was against the rioters during the LA race riots in 1992 by Bush Sr. It's been done over the years against a lot of people, though. Most of it's rioting. There's been a few that's been railroad disputes and stuff like that's what it is. There's been a few that's been slave rebellions that have been put down because of it, way back in the 1800s and stuff like that. So, yeah. And the fact that you would have basically domestic terrorists this time around, being Antifa, BLM, etc., that are out there, attacking ICE agents, trying to murder federal agents, etc., there, doing all kinds of terrorist attacks out here. It's like, yeah, it's more than time to enact this shit, dude. It's more than time to invoke this already is what it is. And I'm not 100% sure if you actually need the power of Congress to do it or not. I don't think you do. But the thing is, it might be like a majority vote or something like that, which if that be the case, then Trump has a majority in there to get that done. And I think at this point, there'd be a lot of people that would back that. Obviously, Democrats won't back it because they're still trying to pull this bullshit government shutdown and then be like, oh, Republicans control everything. It's like, no, they don't, dude. And you know damn well you have to have 60 votes in the fucking U.S. Senate to pass any piece of legislation. You cocksucker piece of shit Democrats are only willing to give up 2 votes right now is what it is. And ironically enough, it's the ones that are very moderates that are the ones actually voting with Republicans to keep the actual government open is what it is. It would be John Fairman. I forget who that person was offhand. It was I want to say it was a woman, but I'm not sure offhand. But yeah, they had 53 votes as it was out of 60 they need. And all it would literally take is 7 Democrats being like, you know what, fuck it, let's do this already. But they don't want to do that because they're scumbags, because they're pieces of shit, because they're little fucking traitors to this country, and they know damn well that all their fucking voter base is as much of illegals at this point and dead people. And if we actually did the right things right now, and this is the truth, I'll tell you right now, if I was in Trump's spot right now, dude, they want to sit there and call me a dictator and stuff like that, I would go a dictator on day one, honestly. At this point, I mean that for real. It would have been, I guess not dictatorial, it would have been basically constitutional evocation and stuff like that, because I would have already enacted stuff against the Democrats at this point, or enacted stuff against rhinos and stuff at this point, and you would have solved about probably 90% of the government gone at this point, honestly, because they're all a bunch of fucking traitors in this country is what it is. And the entire point of the matter is, we would have had a much better country overall, because you would have then had new based elections that would have actually been legit constitutional based elections, and not a bunch of scumbags that want to take their oath of office on fucking comic books and stuff like that piece of shit Robert Garcia did at the beginning of the year. Which, how is that motherfucker even in office right now when he literally took a sworn oath on a Superman comic when he got into office to the U.S. Bible and stuff, or sort of a U.S. Constitution / Bible, what it was there, dude? How is that on immediate grounds for termination at that point? How is it on immediate grounds for being removed from office at that point, honestly? It's beyond me that they haven't done that stuff yet. And again, it shows really the spineless fucking cowardice of the Republican Party at this point, honestly, is what it is. So, but anyway. So for the rest of the episode here, I'm going to go over what the Insurrection Act is, how it's been used in the past and stuff like that, what it is there, and go from there. And as far as I'm aware, it only takes a presidential proclamation is what it is, which I guess has been floated around now in the last week or so by Trump and various people. Probably Bondi is my guess is one of them, and Secretary of State and everything else like that would be then. So, which I think is Marco Rubio right now. I'm not sure. I can't remember offhand. But yeah, I'm guessing it's those people that are like, okay, do we want to do this? Do we want to do this? Or whatever the case be. It's like, no, you should have already done it weeks ago, dude. Seriously. It should have been October 1st. It should have been done then back then is what it is, man. So, anyway. And then, of course, you got all these stupid cunt Democrats like Klobuchar, etc. They're all like, oh, Trump doesn't have the power to put National Guard on the streets of the cities and stuff like that. It's like, the hell he doesn't, dude. It's exactly what we do in our Insurrection Act at that point, is what it is. It's exactly what U.S. presidents in the past have done, whether it be Kennedy, whether it be LBJ, etc., back in the 60s, during all the rioting and stuff like that back then. They did exactly that by doing a declaration of Insurrection Act, what it was then. So, anyway. But, yeah, before we go into that, though, I want to talk about something else real quick, which is basically, apparently the Nobel Peace Prize people snubbed Trump again, even though he's making peace deals between Israel and Hamas now, is what it is. And instead went with the opposition woman to Maduro in Venezuela there, which I'm like, is she really in opposition, or is she just some like government plant, basically? Because I feel like this is just Juan Guaido 2.0 at this point. If you don't know who Juan Guaido is, he was the guy that was brought during Trump's first administration, the State of the Union address. And I'll tell you what, if I have ever seen a demon in real life, that dude was fucking it, man. Like, that dude looked demonically evil and basically like Latino Obama at that point is what it is. So, anyway, and he hasn't been heard from ever since then is what it was. So, I don't know if Murado secretly murked his ass out or what it was there, dude. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, if these people were true opposition to a dictator, they would have already been, rounded up by the dictatorial forces at that point and, like black bagged and given a rendition flight or something. That's what it would have been then. So, anyway. But moving on to what the Insurrection Act is. So the Insurrection Act of 1807, which, like I said, was created by our founding father, Thomas Jefferson, is a federal law that empowers the President of the United States to nationally deploy the U.S. military into federalized National Guard units of the individual states to, in specific circumstances, such as the suppression of civil disorder, which would be, like we're seeing right now, like terrorism, rioting, etc., there's what it is, of insurrection, of armed rebellion against the U.S. government, federal government of the United States, as well as another one. And that's another thing, too, by the way. At this point, when you have Antifa talking about doing, like, quote-unquote laser tag, which is them shooting a bunch of lasers at U.S. government choppers and planes and stuff like that to distract, which would literally blind, by the way. It wouldn't be distracted, it'd be to blind the pilots and stuff like that to crash them. Like, yeah, it's time to round these fucking terrorists up by an Insurrection Act at this point, dude. And stomp their asses out. Public execution at this point really is what it needs to be. And it really does need to be us just building some fucking gallows and just hanging these people at this point, honestly, or, give them a fucking guillotine treatment like they want is what it is there. So, anyway. So the Insurrection Act provides a statutory exemption to the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 that limits presidential deploying the U.S. military to enforce either civil law or criminal law within the United States after invoking and before exercising the powers authorized under the Insurrection Act, which is Title 10 U.S. Code 254, requires the publication of a presidential proclamation whereby the U.S. president formally orders the dispersion of the peoples, dispersion of the peoples committing civil unrest or armed rebellion, which would be basically calling for Antifa to basically fuck off is what it is then. So Defense Department guidelines define Homeland Defense as a constitutional exemption to the restrictions of the Posse Comitatus Act. Therefore, the political, military, and police measures necessary to protect national security from external threats are exemptions to the restrictions of the Act. Then it was purpose and content. The Act empowers U.S. President to call into service the U.S. Armed Forces and National Guard, quote, when requested by a state's legislator or governor, if the legislator cannot be convened to address an insurrection within the state. So that's one version, obviously, you can do. Second one, to address an insurrection in any state, which makes it impractical to enforce the law, which is exactly where Trump would be able to enforce it right now, is what it is right there, ain't that one. Or, quote, to address an insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination of conspiracy in any state which results in the deprivation of constitutionally secured rights and where the state is unable, fails, or refuses to protect said rights. This is the other one he could do it under, by the way. So you could basically do it under 2 of the 3 at this point. The only one he couldn't do it under would be this first one because it would have to be like governor or state legislator. But then again, depending on the state legislator, they could be able to be like, hey, bring here's what it is then. So, but yeah, you can do it under 2 of the 3 right now, which would be the second one, which would be the law not being enforced. And then the third one should be to a direction domestic violence, unlawful combination or conspiracy in any state which results in deprivation of constitutionally protected rights, where state is unable fails, which is what Illinois and actually a few states are doing right now. Illinois, California, New York, New Jersey, I'm trying to think what else, Oregon, Washington State, etc., are all in compliance with that one right now, failing to do that shit. So, anyway, continuing on, said the 1807 Act replaced the earlier Calling Forth Act of 1792, which had allowed for federalization of state militias with similar language that allowed either for federalization of state militias or use of the armed forces in the case of rebellion against the state government. The act did not provide a criminal penalty for insurrection, which was instead introduced by the Confiscation Act of 1862. The 1807 Act, which has been modified twice in 1861, new section was added allowing the federal government to use National Guard and armed forces against the will of the state government in the case of, quote, rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States in anticipation of continued unrest during the Civil or after the Civil War. So that was basically when the Civil War happened. It was they had that one after that. 1861 is what it was then. And in 1871, the Third Enforcement Act revised the Section 253 to protect Black Americans from attacks by the KKK. Language added at that time allows the federal government to use the act to enforce the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Section of the act was invoked during the Reconstruction era and again during the desegregation fights of the Civil Rights era, which would be the 1960s, by the way. So, and then we actually have the list of how many times this was used over the years, which is all these times right here is what it is and what they were used for. So, back in April 19th of 1808, then President Thomas Jefferson, who was the one that was behind the whole act, did it for violations of the Embargo Act of 1807 around Lake Champlain. It was violations, and results were violations continue. Act repealed in 1809. And then I think that was the original act, is what it was then. So obviously it would have a different act, and obviously after the fact is what it was then. And then we had February 10th, 1831. August 24th, 1831, and January 28th of 1834 by President Andrew Jackson, who doesn't know about Andrew Jackson. I believe this guy was considered a racist, but it was interesting because he was also one of the guys who, after dueling was outlawed in America, he would still try to duel people with pistols and stuff like that. So, and honestly, I think if we brought back public dueling, it would do a lot to fix this country real quick, is what it is. So, anyway. But yeah, the times that Jackson enacted the Insurrection Act were a dispute around the Arkansas-Mexico border in 1831, which resolved before troops were sent out. In August of 1831, it was a slave rebellion in Southampton County, Virginia, which was the result of a rebellion being suppressed. And in 1834, it was a right over labor dispute in Maryland, resolved before the troops actually got sent out. So basically 2 of the 3 times that Andrew Jackson did it didn't result in anything because it was already done by the troops who were actually sent there is what it was. Because, of course, back in those days, you had to basically, get the troops out there, and it would be potentially weeks, if not months, before they even got there, depending on where they were going. So it makes sense for it to be, over before it even got boots on the ground, basically. However, in this case, nowadays, it would just be like in a day, they would just be out there on by like plain as what it is then. So, or actually, probably less than a day. So, anyway, so you had 1808, 1831, 1834, and then the 5th time it was done was by Abraham Lincoln, April 15th of 1861, which happened to be relating to the American Civil War, is what it was. So, and then from there, it was Ulysses S. Grant was the next president to do stuff from 1871, 1873, 1874, and 1876, respectively. And he enacted it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And it's pretty much all different insurgencies, insurrections, etc., that were done and a lot of what his was basically white supremacist insurrection across former Confederacy, violence in Louisiana after contested election, white supremacist insurrection and massacre in Vicksburg, white supremacist attempted coup in Arkansas, which I feel like somebody updated these to say white supremacist now is what it is. Because I'm pretty sure that it was just like rebellions back then is what it was considered by like the former Confederates. By the former Confederates is what it was. Because I swear to God, I read this before and it was like it did not say white supremacist back then is what it was. So obviously somebody's doing editing of this shit is what it is then. Then there were 2 times was supposedly white supremacist insurrection and coup in Louisiana, which was New Orleans. The state government liberated. Insurgency continued in other areas until 1877. And then in 1876, it was white supremacist paramilitias in South Carolina. Paramilitias dispersed. Troops stay until 1877. And then from there, we had Rutherford B. Hayes, which was in July 1877. It was a railroad strike in multiple states, which was strike suppressed, eventual reform. And then the other time Rutherford B. Hayes did it, it was October 7th, 1878. It was a war between rival business/gang factions in Lincoln County, New Mexico, and it was most fighting stops. That's what it said there. Which, for those who don't know, this was actually part of the Lincoln County War, I believe is what it was then, which would have been involved with Billy the Kid and people like that is what it is, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Billy the Kid series actually went over that in the 2nd season, I want to say, maybe, or maybe it's the beginning of the 3rd season here is what it is. They're doing Lincoln County War is what it is there. So, anyway. From there, we had May 3rd of 1882, which was Chester A. Arthur. And it was gang violence in the Arizona Territory, where gangs were suppressed. Which, again, this would probably be most likely what it would be on history as Trump. It would be gang/terrorist organizations, which would be Antifa, etc. There is what it would be. Because now it's coming out that not only is Antifa responsible for a lot of this stuff there and like with cartels and stuff like that's what it is then. So, anyway, then we had November 7th, 1885, and February 9th, 1886, as well as July 8th, 1894, which were Grover Cleveland. When he was in power then, he did multiple ones there. The first 2 were riots against Chinese citizens in the Washington Territory, occurred in 1885 and 1886, and it was riots being suppressed then. And then 1894, it was strike in multiple states where the strike was suppressed and reformation happened. That's what it was. Then in 1914, Woodrow Wilson enacted it one time, which was a strike and uprising in Colorado. Strike and uprising suppressed. Another reformation happened then. August 30th, 1921. Warren G. Harding, who was then president, did a strike and uprising suppression in West Virginia. Then in 1932, July 28th, Douglas MacArthur did a Army General illegally invokes act against World War I veterans marching for military bonuses in Washington, D.C. Protest was suppressed. So that's actually an interesting one because I don't remember ever reading that one before. And it was interesting that it was illegally invoked. So, and then from there, it wasn't until 1943, June 21st, 1943 specifically, that Franklin Delano Roosevelt suppressed a race riot in Detroit, Michigan. Then on September 23rd, 1857, Dwight D. Eisenhower used it for an Arkansas National Guard forbids black students from a schoolhouse in Little Rock, Arkansas. So this is basically the whole, what do you call it now? Yeah, it was Little Rock 9 that was basically enacted to deal with what it was there, and it allowed these kids to go to school then and be segregated into, I believe it was all white schools at the time is what it was then. So, and then from there, we did not have it again until 1962 with JFK, which was 1962 and 1963. We had September 30th, 1962, June 11th, 1963, September 10th, 1963. The one in 62 was a siege and riot at the University of Mississippi due to racial integration. The one on June 11th, 1963 was Governor of Alabama forbids black students from the school in Tuscaloosa, which was, the schoolhouse door. when that piece of shit George Wallace, who was a known fucking racist back then, wouldn't allow these black kids to segregate into the white schools, is what it was. And then September 10th, 1963, it was Alabama National Guard forbids black students from all white schools. And then after JFK's death, you then had LBJ do it 3 different times, which were March 20th, 1965, July 24th, 1967, and April 5th, 1968. In 1965, it was done because of Alabama policemen suppressing first Selma of Montgomery marches, which would be the ones that I believe MLK were part of for the Civil Rights Act, is what it was then. And then the second one was protests and riots in Detroit, Michigan. This was 1967 then, when you had Detroit Uprising, is what it was there. And the 12th Street Riots, what they called it back then. And then in 68, it was riots and unrest in multiple states after the assassination of MLK Jr., as they call it, the Holy Week Uprising then, or the King Assassination Riots is what it's also known as. And then we had Ronald Reagan enacted one time in November 24th of 1987, which was a prison riot in Atlanta over announced deportations of Cuban detainees. And then Bush Sr. enacted it twice, the first time on September 20th, 1989, which was looting in the United States Virgin Islands after Hurricane Hugo. And then the final one ever, for time being right now, was May 1st of 1992, which was due to the LA race riots. So, and that was also a riot being suppressed then. And the one previous to that with Hurricane Hugo was to restore order, is what it was. So, but yeah, I believe that's 31 times it was enacted in the U.S. history right now. Let me go ahead and go back on that just to count again. I swear to God it was 31, but I could be wrong, maybe more than that now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Yeah, 31. Okay. So yeah, so Trump did enact the actual Insurrection Act then. It would be the 32nd time in U.S. history since 1807 that would be enacted. That's what it is. And I think the only reason he hasn't done it yet is because he's basically trying to quell stuff without actually having to invoke the Insurrection Act. But the thing is, like, it would be much easier to get shit done right now if he just did it right now. Like, if he just actually was like, no, fuck it, we're enacting the Insurrection Act, fuck these people. They're a bunch of terrorists, let's do this shit. And we can be so much better off as a country right now as it would be. And I think that's the problem right now is, like, Trump, like, going back in history to what Donald Trump has always been as a political affiliated person at this point. The guy was a Democrat for like 30-something years, dude. At least 30-something years anyway. Going back to the 90s, obviously, and I think it was before that, it was even Democrat before that, so it would have been more like 50-something years then. So, you know, when you have like JFK democracy in your background and stuff like that, that's what it would basically been then. It's much harder to then, you know, shift into something else is what it is, and that's why, honestly, when you look at what Trump's administration is right now with like the whole MAGA party and stuff like that, it's not even really Republicans, it's literally a reform party of in the 90s, which was what Ross Perot created back then, is what it was. And it's not even quite that reform party, it's like a variation of that party is what it is then. So, yeah, it's something that needs to change, and it's honestly something that needs to get done right now. And if we really want to have true law and order being restored in this country, not even unification, because that's never going to happen again, that's what it is, dude. It would have to be law and order being restored at this point, and the only way to do that properly would be to literally invoke the Insurrection Act at this point. Or Evoke, I guess it would be. Or no, I'm sorry, it will be Invoke at that point. But yeah, like, something needs to get done, and it's time to get it done now. And the thing is, and the reason I say this now, obviously, is because the longer that Trump waits right now, dude, the more and more and more of a chance, if we actually do get to the 2026 midterms, he's going to fuck the Republican Party is what it is, dude. He's going to fuck all the good people that are getting into power right now. are trying to run for office right now. And the problem is when he's also endorsing rhino pieces of shit like Vera Ramaswamy, who is a total fucking anchor baby sellout in this country, who needs to be nowhere near the Ohio governorship at this point. Enough is enough of this shit, dude. Like, enact the stuff, do your job as president, suppress these motherfuckers, arrest these terrorists, and get our country back to fucking law and order at this point, man. And anything else after the fact, then talk to the Republican Party about doing a new 94 crime bill at that point. Because that's what we need to be doing at this point, honestly. We need to be doing an updated version of the 94 crime bill that would actually allow for these violent-ass criminals that these black judges and mayors and DAs, etc., keep letting back on the streets fucking 50-something times. No, you have a 3 strikes thing in place at that point, or even a 1 strike thing, depending on what their crime is severity-wise. And they just never get out again is what it is then, dude. And if they do something so severe that's like death penalty warranting, then just kill their ass at that point, honestly. Like, just give them a federal death penalty at that point is what it is then, man. And don't have it be like 30-something years on death row. Have it be like 3 months or something. If that be the case, then it's like 90 days and you're done. You get like 1 appeal and then you're done, bro. Or depending on how severe the crime actually is, it's like you get no appeals and they're just taken out that day and put in a fucking firing squad or something. That's what it is then. So, anyway. Like that piece of shit that killed that Irina woman, he should already be in a fucking chair getting shot to death is what it is right now, dude. By firing squad. And the fact that he's not is just shows what kind of a slap in the face that this country is, where we're just letting these pieces of shit live day after day is what it is. When they've purposely taken lives based on race is what it is. And it's like I was watching something the other day where they were talking about in the prisons and like the different orders and stuff like that, different races and things like that. And how in a lot of prisons among the white convicts, it's basically actually having like legit standards and stuff like that, where, you know, if a dude is a rapist or something like that, it's like, no, fuck you, like, you're done, dude. We're just gonna, you know, they're just gonna murk him out inside the prison, what it is then. Versus if it's some black dude or some Latino guy or whatever the case be, and, you know, they, God forbid, rape a white woman and stuff like that, it's fucking clout to these people is what it is, dude, in many cases. Where they're just getting high fives from their fucking, you know, own race of idiots is what it is then. And like that's what I'm saying, dude. Like these people, like I guarantee there's a lot of prisoners right now in the prison system there in South Carolina, or sorry, not South Carolina, North Carolina, that are actually like all happy that dude murdered that Irina woman is what it is. Because they're probably like, yeah, you got that white bitch, fuck that bitch. And it's just sick ass people, dude. It's just sick, demonic evil is what it is there. And it's something that needs to be dealt with immediately is what it is. And now is the time to deal with that stuff, dude. Now is the time to actually do what needs to be done in this country and deal with these fucking criminals with a new crime bill. And it's also time to deal with these fucking terrorists by invoking the Insurrection Act for the 32nd time in U.S. history. And it's as simple as that. Hope you guys enjoy this episode of Freedom Friday. I will be back possibly tonight, but I'm not sure, for like a grandstand or something like that. Because I do kind of want to discuss Charlie Kirk a little bit more. There's a lot of weird stuff coming out in the past week about his whole assassination, now what it is, and I feel like it needs to be discussed. And specifically what I want to talk about is the text messages that are now coming to light that Candace Owens is basically outed, and then Charlie Kirk's wife / Turning Point USA team has admitted to the fact that them being real now is what it is, which is very weird to me in general, because why would you even admit to stuff like that? And it kind of it almost leads like more credence to the fact that this may actually be some like grand conspiracy, honestly. And it might not just be some like random, you know, Antifa trans motherfucker, whatever the case be now. And it might just be like, you know, a scapegoat and somebody else being the ones behind it, what it is then. So now, do I believe that? Not 100% right now, because I feel like there's enough evidence to show that, like, obviously there was, like, a dude on the roof taking a shot is what it is there. But, like I said on Honda's chat on Sunday, I feel like we could definitely clear up a lot of this stuff if they would if the actual Turning Point USA people would just be like, hey, we want to make sure that this is all, you know, out in the open. This is the camera angle. That was the camera behind Charlie after he was shot. this is what they were doing on the ground with his, potential body or whatever it was there, and why there's no blood on these people's legs and shit, which is another weird thing, by the way, too, that I found recently, which is like, it's a video of them like supposedly like trying to grab him up after he was shot or something like that, but yet there's no blood on their hands, there's no blood on their khaki pants, etc., which is very strange to me, because if the dude was shot and like, there's like this big blood pool coming out of his neck and stuff like that, like, I could see there not being, like, depending on obviously where they're grabbing him at, like there might not be blood on that side of his body potentially, but at the same time, like, the fact that several of these guys are kneeling down and there's no blood on their pants when they get back up is like very suspicious to me, is what it is there. And I would think even like, no matter what, how you're touching the guy, because you have a entry wound here and an exit wound there, like you'd be bleeding out both sides, is what it is then. So I would think no matter what, they'd have at least some blood on their hands, is what it is, and they got back up, that's what it is. And the fact that, like, when you see people doing like zoom-ins on the stuff and there's nothing there at all, it's just like, yeah, it's very suspicious, dude, in general. So I don't know. I feel like we're being lied to across the board now about all this stuff, dude, is what it is, and I have no idea why. Like, my only assumption at this point would be like money, because it is the root of all evil, obviously, but like at the same point, like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to say it was like a dude like faking his own death or something like that, because I don't think that's what it was. But like at the same time, like, it would explain why Erica Kirk has not been all that sad and going on like podcasts in the weeks since Charlie's supposed death, is what it is then. So, but yeah, like the whole thing just seems very weird. And like, I know people grieve in different ways, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you're not going to be like laughing and shit after your supposed soulmate is dead now, is what it is, dude. So yeah, it just seems very, very suspicious in general. But yeah, we'll talk about that later some more, is what it is then. Either tonight or tomorrow at some point, I'll do the grandstand then, and then I'll do probably Slicey Boy Saturday after that, because I got a couple new blades I want to talk about. They're all D53 steels, what it is there, and just discuss like how truly sharp those things are, because they are some sharp ass knives, dude, for sure. And I know I've talked about DC53 before, is what it is, and it's a pretty good blade steel, man. Like, it's basically D2 on essentially crack at that point. Like, it's Japanese, I believe it is Japanese tooling steel, is what it is, or something. And it's like a heat treat, and better like heat treats and stuff like that, is what it is. They're like make more edge retention happen, is what have you. So, but yeah, I got a big old slicey boy here that I want to talk about. That is really, really nice, and it was on sale this week on Amazon there. But anyway, so yeah, we'll talk about that tomorrow, is what it is then. Along with a few other blades, is what it is then. They're all that kind of steel and stuff. But until later, I will be back in the next one. Hope you guys enjoy this one. And as always, be armed at all times. Know your situational awareness, because you never know what's going to happen. People are fucking crazy. I was watching a video this afternoon, or earlier this afternoon / this morning, where it is the exact place in my moment I used to drive past to go get water down at the park. And it was about probably 10 to 20 YNs running around the streets there, that none of them were more than 16 or 17, and they were all armed with some kind of firearm. So this is exactly why American citizens need full auto at this point, or at least around versus what it is, man, to deal with shit like that. And really, it needs to be the cops going down there and just, ting, 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 dealing with fucking problems, what it is right there. So, of course, the Canton cops are not going to do that, because they're a bunch of fucking pussies led by a piece of shit Democrats, what it is there, refuses to actually fix the damn city and enact law and order again. That's why exactly when Trump enacts the Insurrection Act, he needs to do it to everywhere across this country, dude. It just needs to be like basically a month-long thing where you're sending troops out to like a bunch of different places, and if something else, like maybe not even send troops, just like enact it and then be like, hey, any American citizen who is armed, etc., that wants to come to us and basically get like a badge or something, they can do like a bounty hunting kind of thing, what it is there. Because I guarantee if they were like part of a strike team or a quick reaction force or something like that's what it is, dude, you could have a lot of people doing that stuff. So I'd personally have no problem kicking in doors at this point myself, honestly, dude. Obviously, I'm not going to be just a door kicking because I don't have the strength in my legs to do that, is what it is. But yeah, I'll definitely be like the second or third guy in the stack, is what it is then. So, or if it's like dude kicking it and then it's like first guy through the door, whatever the case be, like I'd be fine being that guy, honestly. It's dealing with the fucking problems that it is then in this country, which is all the criminals and shit like that, dude. But anyway, it is what it is. I doubt it'll happen in my lifetime, though, but it'd be interesting if it did, though. But yeah, it's definitely time to restore law and order in this country and start charging these teens and preteens as adults at this point if they're going to be doing adult crimes with this, man. And again, it can all be fixed easily with having an actual new version of the 94 crime bill where you just have like 3 strikes enactments and stuff like that's what it is, isn't it? So, and then obviously, you know, not allowing repeat offenders to get back on the streets when they're doing violent crimes again and again and again is what it is there. But anyway, till later. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out. Stay safe. Always be situationally aware. Always be armed. And always be ready for anything because you never know what's going to happen. It could be a bunch of YNs. It could be a bunch of Islamic terrorism going on. It could be a bunch of Antifa terrorism going on in this country that you got to worry about. Or it could just be some psycho leftist walking into a place and opening fire on a bunch of people for that matter. So, anyway, till later. I will see you guys on the next one. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and always be carrying. Peace out, y'all.